Hello. So I'm a manager and I have an employee that I'd like to provide feedback to, but I'm not sure how. This person is good technically, but they're not great at following instructions, especially even when it's really important that they follow them well. For example, we recently were implementing a new process that included personal access codes that were both private and public. And it was really important for security that they follow the instructions correctly. To ensure that they understood the process, we did everything we could to ensure that they would understand what to do. So we had a workshop. We made ourselves available for questioning. We wrote up the instructions as clear as we could and distributed them. And it is the case that most employees were able to follow the instructions as hoped. However, unfortunately, this employee got the instructions the wrong way around and actually opened ourselves up to a huge security risk. So, and this hasn't been the only time that they didn't follow instructions and were the only person who didn't follow their instructions. So, I would appreciate any help in how to address this.
Thanks for the question. So, what I hear is that you have an employee who is good overall at the rest of their job, but they're having problems when there's a more involved procedure or process that needs to be followed. I think there are two aspects to this question of how to give feedback in this situation. And the first is finding the words to describe their behavior. And then I think implicit in your question is that you'd like to understand in your feedback discussion why they haven't been able to follow the instructions and how can you help them improve. To describe their behavior, you could say, I noticed there were several times when we had processes we needed everyone to follow, and you didn't complete the steps in the way that we aimed to describe in the instructions. I think there's a gap in our ability to get this information across to you, and I'd like to discuss what we can do so that the instructions for these types of tasks are easier for you to follow in the future. Now you've opened up this frame for the conversation. And the next thing is to engage with the employee to understand what's their experience and why they think that they've had difficulties following the instructions. So one possibility is that this employee has difficulties processing long written instructions. This can happen if people have dyslexia or other types of neurodiversity, whether it's been diagnosed or not, or whether it's even at a diagnosable threshold. Some people just find reading long written instructions much more difficult. If this is the case, you could have an arrangement where they get additional support or a dedicated question and answer time in these types of situations. Maybe they're a bit embarrassed to ask questions because they perceive that their level of ability to understand these types of instructions to be much lower than everyone else's, and so this might cause them to be hesitant to ask questions in a group. It could be that they also just find following instructions very tedious to read through and not recognize it as a very important part of their work. It might be that it hasn't been emphasized enough how important it is to follow these instructions, and they are just quickly skimming through and hastily doing something in the middle of other tasks. If this is the case, you can emphasize that it is a very important part of the job to engage in this painstakingly detailed reading and following of instructions, and that even though it's tedious, it is just a type of attention and focus that requires training, and the devotion to this type of detail orientation is part of the job. Another part of this issue is the degree to which the employee does feel uncertain about how they understand the instructions and are afraid to ask. So it could be that they didn't even realize that they were following the instructions incorrectly, in which case it's about having the, emphasis on the focus and detailed process. On the other hand, it could be that they had niggling feelings of uncertainty and either ignored those feelings or actively recognized those feelings of uncertainty, but were not comfortable asking questions. And so in this case, it's important to have a discussion of how important it is for them to feel comfortable raising their questions and asking when they are not sure about the exact procedures, and not to feel embarrassed about this, because it is absolutely the case that different people find different levels of ease in following these types of long instructions. And so the best thing you can do is to have an authentic discussion with this employee where you really express that you would like to reduce this gap in understanding and really help your ability to communicate these things very clearly to them, as they're a very good employee and doing a good job otherwise. Gaining clarity about their experience with engaging in trying to follow these instructions will help you understand where the solution lies in terms of providing intervention and support to help them in the future.